She said, "My college soulmate's in town, I'm staying at his hotel, just to see if the spark's still there." I smiled. Follow your heart. The next morning, I delivered divorce papers to room 214. Her spark died instantly. Looking back, I realize some people mistake comfort for complacency, but I was just being myself, the same person she fell in love with 7 years ago. I'm Derek, 37, and I work as a renewable energy consultant, analyzing wind patterns and solar efficiency for corporate clients across Texas, while my wife Amanda, 35, built her career as a digital marketing strategist here in Austin. We met at the local farmers market on a perfect October Saturday morning, both reaching for the same jar of wildflower honey from a local beekeeper. I was drawn to her genuine laugh and the way she asked intelligent questions about sustainable agriculture, while she later told me she loved that I could explain wind turbine blade design over craft beer tastings without sounding pretentious. We spent 3 incredible years building something real: weekend camping trips, cooking classes, lazy Sunday mornings reading different sections of the newspaper and sharing interesting articles. When she got promoted to senior strategist, I relocated from my beloved Colorado mountains without hesitation, taking a remote consulting position because supporting her ambitious career goals felt like the most natural thing in the world. I thought we were true partners building a life together. Over the past 18 months, though, something fundamental shifted in ways I couldn't quite pinpoint at first. Amanda started guarding her phone like it contained classified government secrets, always placing it face down during our dinner conversations and stepping onto the balcony to take calls that used to happen openly in the living room. She'd bring up college memories with increasing frequency, random stories about professors and dormitory adventures, late-night study sessions, and campus traditions that seemed to surface from nowhere during our normally easy conversations. "Remember how spontaneous I used to be in college?" she'd ask wistfully while I prepared our usual Tuesday night stir-fry. "I feel like I've completely lost that adventurous part of myself, like I've become too settled." Her work schedule became increasingly erratic too, which struck me as particularly odd since her client portfolio was well established and she'd previously maintained excellent work-life boundaries. When I'd ask about her day over dinner, she'd offer vague, distant responses about emergency brainstorming sessions and last-minute strategy meetings that apparently required working until well past midnight. I trusted her completely, perhaps too completely, attributing the changes to work stress and the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. I kept thinking she was experiencing some kind of professional rough patch, that the pressure from demanding clients was affecting her mood and energy levels. I'd suggest weekend getaways to our favorite bed and breakfast in the hill country or spontaneous date nights at that wine bar where we had our first real conversation, anything to help us reconnect and rediscover our rhythm. She'd consistently dismiss these suggestions as forced romance and trying too hard to recreate something that's naturally faded. Meanwhile, I maintained the routines and traditions that had always anchored our relationship: early morning jogs through Zilker Park, carefully prepared home-cooked meals featuring seasonal ingredients from our beloved farmers market, weekend visits to discover new local vendors and artisans. I didn't realize she was interpreting these consistent gestures of love and commitment as concrete evidence of how predictable and boring I'd apparently become. The revelation came during what I thought was just another ordinary Tuesday evening dinner. I'd prepared Amanda's favorite salmon with roasted vegetables, opened a bottle of that Sauvignon Blanc she loved, and was telling her about a particularly interesting wind farm project in West Texas when she suddenly set down her fork and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "Derek, I need to tell you something important," she began, her voice carrying a strange mixture of excitement and nervous energy that immediately put me on alert. "Connor is coming to Austin this weekend for a tech conference." Connor, a name I'd heard scattered throughout those increasing college reminiscences but never given much thought to. "That's nice," I replied, genuinely confused about why this warranted such a serious announcement. "He's staying at the downtown Marriott," she continued, her eyes bright with something that made my stomach begin to knot. "And I think I need to spend the night with him." The words hung in the air between us like a physical presence. I set down my wine glass carefully, my engineering mind trying to process what I'd just heard while my heart started racing. "Spend the night with him," I repeated slowly, hoping I'd somehow misunderstood. To see if the spark is still there, she clarified, as if this explanation made everything perfectly reasonable. Connor was my soulmate in college, Derek. We had this incredible connection that I've never been able to forget, and I need to know if what we have now is real love or just comfortable settling. The casual way she delivered this bombshell, like she was discussing weekend grocery shopping, hit me harder than if she'd screamed and thrown dishes. She explained that she'd been reconnecting with Connor through social media over the past few months, sharing memories and realizing how much passion had been missing from her life. "You're wonderful, Derek, you really are," she said with patronizing kindness that made me want to vomit. "But everything with us is so predictable now. Your morning jogs, your perfectly planned meals, those weekend farmers market trips we've done 100 times. Connor represents spontaneity and excitement, the part of myself I lost when I became too comfortable." I sat there processing her words while she continued building her case like she was presenting a marketing proposal to a client. She insisted this wasn't cheating because she was being completely honest about her intentions, claiming that sneaking around would be worse than this transparent exploration of her feelings. "I owe it to both of us to figure out what I really want before we waste more years in a marriage that might not be fulfilling either of us," she said, reaching across to squeeze my hand in a gesture that felt more condescending than comforting. "Follow your heart," I finally managed to say, my voice surprisingly calm despite the emotional earthquake happening in my chest. She looked almost surprised by my response, perhaps expecting anger or desperate pleas to reconsider. "Really? You're okay with this? If you think Connor might be your soulmate, then you should definitely explore that," I continued, already mentally composing the text I'd send to my attorney friend Marcus the moment she left with her overnight bag. "I wouldn't want to hold you back from true love." Amanda's face lit up with relief and what looked disturbingly like gratitude. "I knew you'd understand. This is exactly why I fell in love with you. You're so rational and supportive." She spent the next hour packing her overnight bag while humming, occasionally calling out questions about whether she should bring the red dress or the black one, as if I were helping her prepare for a normal business trip rather than witnessing the end of our marriage. I arrived at the downtown Marriott at exactly 7 a.m. on Saturday morning, armed with divorce papers and accompanied by a professional process server named Janet who'd handled hundreds of these situations. Marcus had worked through the night to prepare everything, and I'd hired a private investigator named Paul Rodriguez who specialized in infidelity cases and had already provided me with some very interesting preliminary findings about Connor's background. The hotel lobby was buzzing with early morning conference attendees grabbing coffee and checking schedules on their phones, the perfect cover for what was about to unfold. I spotted Amanda and Connor immediately. They were sitting at a corner table near the restaurant entrance, sharing what looked like an intimate breakfast and gazing at each other like teenagers discovering love for the first time. Connor was exactly what I'd expected, tall, artificially confident, wearing an expensive suit that screamed tech money, and gesturing animatedly while Amanda hung on his every word with an expression of pure adoration. "Amanda Walsh?" Janet approached their table with professional precision, her voice carrying just enough authority to cut through their romantic bubble. "You're being served with divorce papers." The look of absolute shock on Amanda's face was worth every penny I'd paid for Marcus's emergency services. She went completely pale, her coffee cup clattering against the saucer as her hands started shaking. "Derek?" she whispered, scanning the lobby until she spotted me standing near the reception desk, looking perfectly calm in my weekend casual clothes. "What are you doing here?" "Following my heart," I replied, walking over to their table with measured steps. "Just like you suggested." Connor, who'd been frozen in place during this entire exchange, suddenly found his voice. "Look, man, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding here," he started, his previous confidence evaporating as he realized the situation had taken a very serious legal turn. "This is just old friends catching up, nothing more than that." "Is that what you told your wife Sarah and your 2 kids back in Seattle?" I asked, pulling out my phone to show them the investigator's preliminary report. Connor's face went from confident to terrified in approximately 3 seconds. Paul had done excellent work, credit card statements showing a pattern of expensive dinners and hotel charges in multiple cities, social media activity revealing Connor's systematic approach to reconnecting with former girlfriends, and phone records documenting his carefully orchestrated seduction campaigns with at least 4 other women over the past 2 years. "You're married?" Amanda's voice cracked as she stared at Connor with growing horror. "With children?" "It's complicated," Connor mumbled, suddenly very interested in his scrambled eggs and avoiding all eye contact. "My marriage has been over for years, we're just staying together for the kids." The oldest excuse in the book, delivered with all the originality of a used car salesman. "Actually," I continued, enjoying watching Connor squirm, "according to my investigator, Sarah thinks you're attending a legitimate tech conference and has no idea you're here romancing your college ex-girlfriend. She's been posting pictures on Facebook of your kids' soccer games, mentioning how proud she is of her hard-working husband." Amanda looked like someone had just explained that Santa Claus was a lie. "You told me you were divorced," she said to Connor, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You said your marriage ended badly and you'd learned to appreciate real love when you found it again." "I never specifically said I was divorced," Connor replied weakly, finally looking up with the expression of a man whose elaborate con had just collapsed. "You assumed that based on our conversations." The beautiful irony of the situation became even more apparent when Connor's phone rang at exactly 8:30 a.m., right as he was trying to convince Amanda that his marriage was essentially over anyway. I watched his face go completely white as he looked at the caller ID and saw his wife's name. "Sarah?" he answered with fake cheerfulness, stepping away from our table but not far enough to avoid being overheard. "Good morning, honey, how are the kids?" Amanda and I could hear Sarah's voice clearly through the phone, bright and loving as she updated him about their son's baseball practice and their daughter's upcoming piano recital. "I was just calling to say how proud I am of you for working so hard at this conference," Sarah continued, completely unaware that her husband was sitting across from his latest conquest. "The kids miss you, but they understand Daddy's building a better future for our family." Connor's face had turned an interesting shade of green as he mumbled responses while trying to move further away from our table. "I miss you too, sweetheart," he managed to say, his voice cracking with what I assumed was guilt. "I'll be home tomorrow evening as planned." "I love you so much, Connor," Sarah's voice carried across the lobby. "You're such a good husband and father." When he hung up, Connor looked like a man who just realized his entire world was about to collapse. Amanda was staring at him with an expression of complete betrayal and dawning comprehension. "That didn't sound like a marriage that's been over for years," she said quietly, her voice deadly calm. "That sounded like a woman who adores her husband and has no idea he's been lying to her for months." "Look, Amanda, you have to understand," Connor started, but she cut him off with a gesture that would have made a traffic cop proud. "No, I understand perfectly now," she replied, standing up from the table with whatever dignity she had left. "You've been using me. All those romantic messages about finding each other again, all those promises about building a new life together, it was all just lines you've probably used on dozens of women." Connor tried one last desperate attempt at damage control. "Amanda, please, what we have is special, but I need time to handle the situation with Sarah properly," he pleaded. "I can't just abandon my children overnight." "You mean you can't abandon your comfortable suburban life overnight?" Amanda shot back, her marketing background apparently giving her excellent insight into manipulation tactics. "You never had any intention of leaving your wife, did you? I was just supposed to be your exciting side adventure until the conference ended." The confrontation was drawing attention from other hotel guests, but Connor's problems were just beginning. His phone buzzed with a text message, and when he looked at it, whatever color was left in his face completely disappeared. "What now?" Amanda asked with bitter curiosity. "My wife just texted," Connor said in a voice barely above a whisper. "She's suspicious about the credit card charges from last night's dinner. She's asking for receipts and an explanation about why I spent $400 on a romantic dinner when I'm supposed to be at business meetings." I couldn't help but smile at the perfect timing. "Sounds like Sarah's smarter than you gave her credit for," I observed. "Maybe you should have paid more attention to your expense account instead of your college yearbook?" Connor grabbed his conference materials and practically ran toward the elevator, mumbling something about needing to check out immediately and catch an earlier flight. He didn't even say goodbye to Amanda, leaving her standing there in the lobby holding her overnight bag and looking absolutely devastated. "I'm such an idiot," Amanda whispered, more to herself than to me. "You believed what you wanted to believe," I replied, not unkindly. "It happens to the best of us." What she didn't know was that Paul's investigation had revealed Connor's systematic approach to targeting emotionally vulnerable women through social media, typically wives who posted about feeling unappreciated or nostalgic about their college years. Amanda had been the perfect mark, successful but restless, married but questioning, and desperate for someone to make her feel special again. 3 months after I filed for divorce, Amanda launched what could only be described as the most desperate reconciliation campaign I'd ever witnessed. It started with voicemails that began apologetic and gradually became increasingly frantic as days passed without responses. "Derek, I know I made a terrible mistake," her first message said, voice shaky but controlled. "Connor was a fantasy, but what we had was real. Please call me back so we can talk about fixing this." By the 3rd week, the messages had evolved into tearful confessions about how she'd lost her mind temporarily and realized what really mattered. She showed up at my new downtown apartment, a sleek 1-bedroom place that I'd chosen specifically because it represented the fresh start I was building, carrying homemade lasagna and wearing the dress from our first anniversary dinner. "I made your favorite," she said hopefully when I opened the door, as if a casserole could undo months of betrayal. "Amanda, I appreciate the gesture, but we're getting divorced," I replied calmly, not inviting her inside. "There's nothing to discuss." "But I love you," she insisted, tears starting to form. "I know that now. Connor was just some stupid midlife crisis thing. You're my real partner, my actual soulmate." The irony of her using Connor's language wasn't lost on me. I'd started dating again, something that Amanda discovered when she drove by my apartment and saw me leaving with Rachel, a brilliant environmental lawyer I'd met through work who shared my passion for sustainable energy and outdoor adventures. Rachel was everything Amanda had never been: genuinely interested in my projects, intellectually curious about renewable technology, and happy to spend weekends exploring Austin's extensive trail system instead of shopping for things she couldn't afford. "Who is she?" Amanda confronted me at my office building the following Monday, clearly having waited in the parking garage for my arrival. "The woman I saw you with yesterday." "Someone who actually wants to be with me," I replied, not stopping my walk toward the elevator. "Amanda, this is borderline stalking behavior. You need to stop." "Is she why you won't even consider counseling?" Amanda followed me into the lobby, her voice getting louder and more desperate. "Derek, we were together for 7 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you anymore?" I stopped walking and turned to face her directly. "It meant everything to me," I said quietly. "That's exactly why I can't forgive what you did. You didn't just cheat, Amanda. You sat across from me at our dinner table and calmly explained why I wasn't good enough anymore, then asked for my blessing to explore your options." Her face crumpled as the reality of her own words hit her again. "I was confused," she whispered. "I thought I wanted excitement, but all I really wanted was to feel appreciated again." "Then you should have talked to me instead of finding someone else to make you feel special," I replied, stepping into the elevator. "Goodbye, Amanda." The campaign escalated from there. She enlisted our mutual friends as mediators, with people calling to tell me how devastated she was and how everyone makes mistakes. She wrote lengthy emails about attending couples therapy and fighting for our love, phrases that sounded suspiciously like dialogue from the romantic comedies she'd always preferred over the documentaries I enjoyed. Her mother even called me, which was particularly bold considering she'd never liked me during our marriage. "Derek, honey, Amanda's just going through a rough patch," Mrs. Patterson said during an awkward phone conversation. "Women sometimes need to sow their wild oats before they can truly appreciate a good man. You're being awfully harsh about one little indiscretion." "With respect, Mrs. Patterson, your daughter didn't have a little indiscretion," I replied evenly. "She planned an affair for months, told me I was boring and predictable, and asked for my permission to sleep with another man to see if he was a better option. That's not sowing wild oats. That's just cruelty. The silence on the other end told me that Amanda hadn't shared the full story with her family. 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I encountered Amanda at our old weekend farmers market where Rachel and I had developed our own Saturday morning tradition of browsing local vendors and planning meals together. I was examining heirloom tomatoes at the same stand where Amanda and I had first met when I felt someone watching me. She was standing about 20 feet away, looking significantly thinner than I remembered and wearing clothes that seemed to hang on her frame. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes that even carefully applied makeup couldn't completely hide. "Derek," she called out softly, approaching our stall with hesitant steps. "Could we please talk privately for just a few minutes? There are some things I need to tell you." Rachel, who was examining organic herbs nearby, looked over with curiosity but no jealousy. I told her the complete story about Amanda and Connor, and she understood that my marriage had ended due to fundamental incompatibility rather than fixable problems. "This is Amanda," I said to Rachel, making the introduction with polite neutrality. "My ex-wife." "Oh," Rachel said with genuine warmth, extending her hand. "It's nice to finally meet you. Derek's mentioned you." Amanda shook Rachel's hand with obvious reluctance, her eyes quickly scanning Rachel's appearance and clearly making unfavorable comparisons to herself. Rachel was naturally beautiful in an understated way, confident without being flashy, and radiated the kind of contentment that comes from knowing exactly who you are. "You look happy together," Amanda managed to say, though the words seemed to physically pain her. "He deserves someone who appreciates him." It was perhaps the first completely honest thing she'd said in months. "Could I speak with Derek alone for just a moment?" Amanda asked Rachel directly. "Of course," Rachel replied easily. "I'll be at the honey stand checking out those lavender varieties we discussed." After Rachel walked away, Amanda turned to me with desperate intensity. "Derek, I need you to know that everything fell apart after Connor," she began, words tumbling out rapidly as if she'd rehearsed this speech multiple times. "I lost my job 3 months ago when word got around the office about what happened. My boss said it reflected poorly on my judgment and professionalism." I wasn't surprised. Amanda's company had always prided itself on family values and ethical standards. Having an affair during a business conference probably didn't align with their corporate image. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said and meant it. Watching someone's life implode wasn't satisfying, just sad. "I've been doing freelance work, but it's not enough to cover my expenses," she continued. "I had to move in with my sister temporarily, and she keeps asking how I managed to mess up such a good marriage. Everyone keeps asking me that, actually." She paused, looking around at the familiar farmers market stalls where we'd spent so many happy Saturday mornings. "I look at you with her," Amanda said, nodding toward Rachel, "and I see exactly what I threw away. The way you look at her is the same way you used to look at me, before I started taking it for granted." "Amanda," I started, but she held up a hand. "I'm not asking you to take me back," she said quickly. "I know that ship has sailed, and honestly, I probably don't deserve another chance anyway. I just needed to tell you that you were right about Connor. He was using me, and I was too stupid and desperate to see it. You were everything I actually wanted, but I convinced myself you were boring because stable felt too much like settling." Her voice cracked slightly. "I threw away the best relationship I ever had because I thought I deserved some fairy tale romance that never actually existed." I watched her struggle with emotions that seemed genuine for the first time since our marriage had started falling apart. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said honestly. "But it was never going to be with me, not after what happened." "I know," she whispered. "I just wanted you to hear me say that I was completely wrong about everything, and that what we had was real and good and I destroyed it for absolutely nothing." 1 year later, my life had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible during those dark months when Amanda was packing her overnight bag for Connor. I'd received a major promotion to Regional Director of Renewable Energy Development, a position that came with significant responsibility for overseeing wind and solar projects across the entire Southwest region. Rachel and I had moved in together to a beautiful house in South Austin with a backyard perfect for the vegetable garden we'd been planning, and we were finalizing details for an engagement trip through several national parks where I planned to propose at sunrise over the Grand Canyon. Meanwhile, Amanda's situation had continued its downward trajectory in ways that made me genuinely sad for her, though not regretful about my decision to end our marriage. Through mutual friends, I learned that her freelance marketing work had dried up almost completely after potential clients discovered her reputation for poor judgment and unprofessional behavior. She'd been forced to take a part-time retail job at a department store, a significant step down from her previous career in digital marketing strategy. Her social circle had largely abandoned her once the full story of her affair became public knowledge, leaving her isolated in her sister's spare bedroom with few prospects for improvement. The final communication I received from Amanda came on what would have been our 8th wedding anniversary, a handwritten letter delivered to my office that my assistant handed to me with raised eyebrows. The envelope was expensive stationery, probably purchased during her previous life when money wasn't a constant concern, and my name was written in her familiar careful script. "Derek," the letter began, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I couldn't let this day pass without acknowledging what it meant and what I destroyed. Today marks what should have been 8 years of marriage, and I've spent the entire morning thinking about the life we should have been building together instead of the mess I created by chasing fantasies." The letter continued for 2 pages, detailing her regrets and describing the loneliness of her current situation with a level of self-awareness that she'd never demonstrated during our marriage. "I see couples at the store where I work, planning their lives together, buying things for their homes, and I remember how we used to do that," she wrote. "I threw away someone who actually loved me for someone who was just using me to feel powerful. I gave up a man who supported my dreams for someone who saw me as disposable entertainment. I can't even explain the logic of it anymore because there wasn't any logic, just selfishness and stupidity." Her final paragraph was perhaps the most honest thing she'd ever written to me. "I'm not writing this to ask for anything or to try to change what happened. I know I made my choice and I have to live with the consequences. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost, and I hope Rachel knows how lucky she is to have found someone who loves the way you do. I hope you're both incredibly happy, because you deserve all the happiness I was too foolish to appreciate." That evening, I showed the letter to Rachel while we prepared dinner together in our kitchen, the same kind of domestic routine that Amanda had once dismissed as boring predictability. "She sounds genuinely remorseful," Rachel observed after reading it carefully. "What do you want to do with it?" "This," I said, walking over to our fireplace and tossing the letter into the flames we'd built to ward off the first real cold snap of winter. Rachel smiled and handed me a glass of wine. "To moving forward," she said, raising her glass in a toast. "And to people who know a good thing when they have it." We spent the evening planning our national parks trip, spreading maps across our coffee table and discussing trail difficulty levels and camping gear requirements. It was exactly the kind of methodical, detail-oriented planning that Amanda had once criticized as unromantic, but Rachel found it exciting and collaborative. "I love how you think through every aspect of our adventures," Rachel said as we marked potential proposal spots on the Grand Canyon Trail map. "It makes me feel like you're investing in our memories before we even create them." The next morning, I woke up early and went for my usual run through Zilker Park, the same route I'd been taking for years but now with completely different energy and purpose. Instead of running to escape thoughts about my failing marriage, I was running to celebrate the life I was building with someone who genuinely wanted to build it with me. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, who was already at work preparing for a major environmental law case. "Can't wait to get home tonight and finalize our park reservations. Love you." Simple, direct, and exactly what I needed to hear. No games, no hidden meanings, no complaints about predictability. Just partnership.